let's take a bit of a different perspective now of what happens to your wealth when you die. Well, it's not something that many of us like to consider, obviously, but it's important, clearly, to your dependents at the same time. It's estate planning, and it can relieve stress and worry. Let's talk through it with Rob Shears from Valor Private Wealth. Rob, good to see you.
Thanks, Andrew.
It is a reluctant area to get into, isn't it? Because you don't really want to consider it. But I guess particularly if you do have dependents, kids and a partner, it's very important.
It's unbelievably important, and with nearly half of all people dying without a will, it's a big problem in society. That when people get to this stage, the difficulty after something happens and when it's not done properly can be very problematic.
All right, so I mean, you mentioned a will. I guess that's the most obvious starting point.
Yes.
What does that need to entail, and beyond that, what do you need for estate planning?
Well, it's quite interesting. The will actually doesn't cover a lot of things people think. The will just covers your items in your name. If you have a house in joint names, it's not covered under the will. Your super's not covered under the will. If you have any trusts, it's not covered under the will. So the will is actually only a very small part of the piece of the pie. You can stream those assets through the will if you do it properly, but the will is actually one of the least important parts if you structure the whole estate plan.
So if well, obviously it's a problem if you die intestate, but if you do have a will and you're saying it doesn't cover those issues and it's contested,
yes.
How is that resolved?
Through multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars with lawyers. So I've seen $4 million spent on an estate arguing. So it can cost a lot more than people think.
Well, particularly with those family offices.
Absolutely, yeah. So it can get very, very expensive when it's not done properly. And it doesn't have to be that expensive to get it done properly. You just need to think about these things and then account for what needs to be done to keep every party happy. And so it's really important to plan these things well in advance. But what a lot of people do is they do their will 10, 15 years ago and they don't update it. Because it does cost a lot of money to do it properly. If you go through an estate planning lawyer, we've got a special deal at the moment which is doing it for $1,800, which is very cheap for a lot of the wills with one of the things which is if you stream all your assets through the will is a lineal descendant testamentary trust. And testamentary trusts are basically the tax planning for the wealthy, because you can stream all your assets through these testamentary trusts, and your children can have kids and their kids and not pay the children tax rate of 66%. So it's enormous tax planning, enormous savings there, and most of these wills are over $5,000, and we're doing it for $1,800 at the moment, which is an amazing deal.
All right, it's not just death, it's also divorce you need to consider at the same time, isn't it?
Absolutely. My number one financial planning advice is don't get divorced. It's
easier said than done, perhaps.
Easier said than done. There's a lot of these things are for if your children have partners and they get divorced, etc. You can protect it through what's called a lineal descendant or a bloodline testamentary trust. So the money flows through and only stays in your bloodline. And that means that if it goes to your children and their grandchildren, it doesn't go to their partners if you structure it correctly, which is enormously important for protecting your wealth through the generations. And so few people have done this properly in their estate planning. And we think it's unbelievably important if you've got any meaningful amount of wealth. So and that's important because there's going to be trillions of dollars passed down in the next 20 years.
Because I guess one of the trickiest areas is trying to sort superannuation, and what happens to that when you die?
Absolutely, and so super is counted separately. You can stream your super through your wills and your lineal descendant testamentary trust if you do it properly, depending on whether you've got adult kids or dependents under your superannuation. So you've got to be careful with that one. But there's binding nominations, there's reversionary pensions in the superannuation. There's lots of ways to structure your super so it doesn't go through the courts, so you can protect it at the superannuation level, which is really important to put that into your estate plans. And that's where a lot of local lawyers, you go to your Dennis Denudo from the Castle Lawyer, and he writes your 3-page will, but he doesn't include the superannuation. But a lot of people, their super is not just their super, but their life insurance is in their super as well. So there's millions of dollars here, and it's not accounted for. And if you don't have a binding nomination updated every 3 years, it lapses and you don't have anything protecting you. So you really need to factor in the superannuation into your estate plans.
And dare I say it, I guess in some instances, the partner or the kids that are left behind would have no idea what is in a portfolio.
Correct. And one of the things that we really spend a lot of time on is actually also listing where all the assets are and then having it so that's protected, so that the where the list is not the person who has the actual password for that list, all the passwords. So all your passwords to a lot of these accounts, it's when someone is an executor of an estate, one of the hardest things is collecting the assets and going to get the bank accounts, but even just passwords for a lot of locked up bank accounts. It's enormously, it's almost a full-time job for 3 to 6 months. So setting that up before anything happens means it's a much easier job. So those sort of steps is what we build, and it really protects the family from that most difficult time.
All right, I'm going to ask you when you should start doing this. I know it's an obvious answer, isn't it?
Well, no, look, there's a lot of people that don't need a full estate plan. If you're a young, single person, a simple estate plan is not that. But as soon as you start getting family, children, if you've got your insurance there, you've got to structure these things so they flow correctly. But it's also flowing correctly for enormous tax savings. So as soon as you start having kids and getting married, you need to start thinking about these things.
Well, and you've got to update it clearly. If you're having more kids, you get divorced, you retire.
Correct. Well, divorce and remarriage can actually reset the will anyway. So your will gets nullified on remarriage in most states.